started. All right, so today we're going to talk about user settings, or for this session, because today we're talking about several different things. For this one, user settings for productivity. So we'll look at some of the commonly used options that people have for making things a little bit more productive with their work with SAP. And there are various settings that you can use. It's just a sampling of some of them. It's definitely not all-inclusive. We'll probably be adding another session to this series to go through some additional functions that we're not able to cover in this 30 minutes. And also, if you have some magic that you use but we don't cover it, then let us know, and certainly we can add it to future sessions. And so I'm going to do the same thing that I've done before. I'm going to take my presentation off of presentation mode, put it side by side with SAP so we can go through the functions in SAP, and you can ask whatever questions that you have. So the first one that we're going to do, and I see my SAP system's responding to me a little bit slow. That's because I have clicked on the wrong button. All right, let me clean up my menu first. There we go. So the first one we're going to do is speeding up the mouse rollover help. So this option is whenever you roll your mouse over any of the icons in SAP, a pop-up box comes up to tell you what that button is used for, and also if there's a keyboard shortcut, provide that to you as well. So we can set the speed on that, or we can even turn that off if we'd like to. By default, the SAP GUI comes up with that at an intermediate speed, and so we'll go look at how to change that. We're going to be living in this session in the customizing of local layout button. That's on the far right-hand side of your standard toolbar. It's always available to you no matter where you navigate in the system. It is a static toolbar, that standard toolbar. So again, it's always there, always available, unlike the favorites, which we looked at, where you have to be at the main menu in order to access it. Now, what I'm going to do before I go into that button is I'm going to roll my mouse over the left-hand side of my SAP screen. I'm going to resize it and just show you that when you resize it to a size where all of the toolbar buttons won't fit on the screen, SAP provides you with a list button, and when you click on the list button, it provides you access to the rest of your buttons that aren't displayed on the screen because of the resizing. So now we see the customizing of local layout button, because it's to the far right, is one of those buttons that will fall into the list. So I like to tell people that because they resize their screens and buttons go away and they don't know where those buttons have gone to. All right, so now back to our topic, speeding up that mouse. We're going to click on that customizing of local layout button. We're going to be living in this options section for most of this 30 minutes. And when we come in here, we're going to click on the options tab if it's not already displayed. Now you'll notice your quick info. This is the section that we want to take a look at. This quick info is for your rollover speed. So if you do not want those pop-up windows to come up, you would select none. If you want to slow it down, which is set by default to slow, which frustrates some people and they want to go in and speed it up, or you can set it to quick to give that very quick pop-up as soon as you roll your mouse over that button. So that's the tool we have for speeding up that mouse or turning it off or slowing it down. All right, so we're going to go to the next tip, and this is changing the way the status bar messages are displayed. So again, I've given you instructions on the PowerPoint slide, but I went ahead and stayed in this option on the SAP side. So we're doing exactly the same thing. We went to the customizing of local layout button, and we went to the options option in the context menu, and then it provided us with this options pop-up window. In here, we're going to look at this message section. So the messages section has 4 different checkboxes available for you. And what this section does is it allows you to change how SAP displays messages to you. These messages by default come up in the status bar. So the status bar, if you roll all the way down to the bottom of your SAP screen, is that message bar where SAP talks to you. So if something's wrong, if it gives you an error message, if it gives you a status message, it will give you a message in that status bar. If you prefer for those messages to come up in a pop-up window, then you can change those here in the messages section of this options pop-up window. So beep at message. So once you get a message from SAP, do you want it to beep at you? Now, we're going to go look in a little bit how to turn on and off sound. So this assumes that your sound has been turned on. So every time you get a message, SAP will beep at you. And I always encourage people to play with these checkboxes and see which settings work best for you. I know for this beep, if I turn this on, I would immediately go and turn that off. That would probably irritate me to get those beeps. The next one, the dialog box at success message. So let's say you run a sales order transaction. When you complete that sales order transaction, it's going to tell you in the status bar that you have a sales order that's been created, and it'll give you the sales order number. That would be a success message. If you want that success message to come up in a pop-up window, then you would check this box. Same thing for the warning messages, same thing for the error messages. This just gives you the ability to have that message in a pop-up box, and it forces you to click on an OK button in order to resolve that pop-up box. Now, I'll give some examples of when you would use success message, because at first glance, people think, well, maybe I would want the error messages to come up because they're really important. But it seems to be a little bit the reverse here. So for the success messages, the one that I just described where you've created a sales order and you get a status bar message that says the sales order has been created and it gives the sales order number, well, if you have it in the status bar, once you press another key to do something else, that status bar message goes away. So if you're somebody that needed to record that sales order number somewhere, you would have to go back and look for that sales order number in order to record that. If you have it come up in a dialog box, then it forces you to click on the OK button, which is a reminder to you, oh yeah, before I click on this OK button to resolve this pop-up box, then I need to record this button. So that's an example of why you might want to turn the dialog box on, so you would check that box. All right, so those are your pop-up messages, changing the way the status bar message displays. The next one is box down at the bottom, underline list links. This one allows you to take a list of data that has links where you can double-click to go to additional information, and it will underline those links. So I'm going to go to an example of that. So I've got that turned on right now. I'll click on the OK button so I can go to a transaction. And I'm going to navigate to the MB51 transaction. Actually, yes, that's the one I want to go to. Let me see if this will give me any data. All right, good. So in this list, you'll notice that under material, material description, everything in the title section of this list is underlined. And it's underlined because I checked that checkbox for underlined links. So I'll go back into the customizing of local layout options, and I'll deselect that underlined list link, and you'll see the effect immediately in my transaction. So if you're watching the material document list at the very top of the list in your header, I'll click on the OK button, and the underlines disappear. You want to immediately know in a list which ones are linkable to additional data, then you can check this box. And as you saw in the transaction, it's immediate, so you don't have to exit out of the transaction or come back into the transaction in order for that to take effect. All right, our next one that we're going to go to is the cursor position, which I apologize, I didn't change the header on this slide. So we're just going to talk about the cursor changes that we can make. I'm going to go back to the main menu so it's not so distracting. I'll go back to my customizing of local layout button, select the options option, and in here I'm going to go to the next tab, which is the cursor tab. So I'll click on the cursor tab, and in the cursor position section I have 4 different options, and I'm going to talk about these different options. First option, automatic tabbing at the end of a field. So I'm typing in a field in a transaction. When I finish typing in that field and I get to the end of the field, it's going to automatically tab the cursor over to the next field. The next one, note cursor position field at tabbing. So if you have this selected, when you tab over to a field, you see a vertical line that shows you your cursor position in the field when you tab. If you have this deselected, you don't get that vertical line that shows you your cursor position in that field. The next one is your position cursor at the end of text. I'm in a transaction, and I have multiple fields on that transaction. And in some of those fields, there's text. When I tab to the field with text in it, it immediately positions my cursor to the end of the text in that field versus the beginning of the text. So when I have this deselected or unchecked, my cursor will be at the beginning of the text. Checked, it will position it at the end of the text. All right, this next one is very confusing when you read it. Select text in edit field in insert mode. All right, so let's break that apart. First of all, you have to be in insert mode. That's what it's telling you at the end of this. So when I'm in insert mode, when I cursor over to a field that has text, it selects that entire text and is ready for you to overwrite that text. So let me go, I'm going to select that. I'm going to select all of these actually, and I'm going to go into a transaction so that we can see the effect of this. Now, how do I find out if I am in overwrite mode or not? The way that I do that is I look down in my status bar, very bottom right-hand corner of my status bar. Let me highlight that. So right here, insert mode. To change that to overwrite mode on my keyboard, just press the insert key, and it'll change it to overwrite mode. So I'll do that. Insert. I'll say I'll do that. I can't do that because I have my pop-up box. All right, I'll click on OK. Well, that's interesting. Okay, so I'll just click on it. I'm not real sure why the insert key on the keyboard is not working. Maybe an option that I have in my personal settings, but you can take your mouse and you can click on the overwrite or insert to change the mode. So we'll stay in insert mode, and we'll navigate over into a transaction. So I'm going to go into the ME22N transaction, which is a purchase order change transaction. And let's find some data. Okay, I'm going to tab over. Okay, I'm going to get to this material group field that has the 0001 in it field. So I'm right now in my item, and I've tabbed over to my material group field. So you notice when I tabbed over to that field, it automatically highlighted the entire text in that field. So when I get ready to type, it's going to overwrite whatever is highlighted in that field. So that check mark that I had for select text and edit field and insert mode, if I had that unchecked, then when I tab over to that material group field or whatever the field is that I'm tabbing over to that has text in it, my cursor would be positioned at the beginning of that text unless I had the other check mark that said note, or excuse me, position cursor at the end of text. Okay, so any questions about those settings for the cursor positioning?
No, ma'am. It does, as you're sitting here listening, there's two things that struck me. And I don't know if it was my computer or your computer, but during the presentation there was a little right-hand corner flash of an email coming through from monster.com. I don't know if that was yours or mine. Let me go look at my email real quick and see if it was me.
Well, it may have been mine. I normally turn my mail off, and I didn't do that.
Okay, so that was going to be my suggestion.
Yeah, I normally turn all my applications off that I'm not using.
Okay. Anyway,
but I got lazy today.
That's all right. It's okay to be lazy with me, but I was just worried that if it, was giving you the new contract or canceling the contract, that you didn't want that to appear to your audience.
Oh no, I don't. I think that would be bad.
Yes, but if you're closing it off, that's great. The other thing was, unlike the first presentation we went through, here you're referring back to a previous screen where we had the boxes checked or not checked, and I was getting lost in the language because there's a whole bunch of language going on in just one picture, and you're referring back to a picture that I may or may not have recorded in my memory banks. So I was.
So probably I should have it in the presentation.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. So if you're, for example, I would give up the left-hand side right now, and then put in on the left-hand side, if you can pull another SAP screen and show what you're talking about, then you can move the cursor back and forth to say, when I check this box on item number 2, that allowed me to hide or display the item we were seeing on the right-hand box. So that was just, because up until then I was right with you, but at that point
Okay.
I started to get dizzy and confused, and part of it
and
was
I can
because
see.
you had in your mind what you were looking at, but I didn't have the same vision in my mind, so that's why we're connecting.
And I can see that too, because you're right. There's a ton of text there. I mean, all of this.
Right.
Just
So
a
even if I knew which one you were speaking to, and I didn't, it would be easier for me.
So
Yeah,
all
that's the box.
these,
That's the one. Yeah.
yeah, it's the box. So
Yeah, so if you had that showing, then that would make it easier to follow. Why am I the only guy dialing? I'm the only guy dialing into this stuff.
well, I think we had the information about this in the newsletter.
Right.
But if people didn't really take note of it in the newsletter,
Mm-hmm.
our notice for this, you know, the little note card that came out, was
Right.
supposed to come out much earlier, and we just had a hiccup in that. So,
Okay.
and I noticed that, I'm sorry?
It's great stuff, and I really hope you can connect with the Pepsi people and show this to them, because you know it's not the conversion of the people that's the problem. It's the ongoing support of the people. And when we can dial this off and say, here's a annual subscription fee, and whenever one guy, you know, and give me up to 20 training sessions or whatever it was, and the people can just dial in at will, and you can run these things as frequent seminars. I mean, I've used SAP for so many years, and some of the stuff I knew, but I'd forgotten, and just listening to you just reminds me, yeah, I could be doing that.
Yeah, and I think that you're right. People do, if you don't use it all the time, you forget about it, and it's in your brain somewhere, but most people don't have the time to really be thinking about that.
Yeah. Plus, it's also cumulative. We talked about, when we talked several years ago about the SAP maturity curve. In the beginning, you know, like we were talking about navigation and technical settings this morning. In the beginning, when you're trying to learn navigation, man, the last thing you're worried about is turning the technical settings on and off. But when you're down into saving your favorites, you want to know that I can turn the technical settings on and off. That makes sense in the context of that, but only because you've matured to the point where that's the next advanced item you want to do.
Oh, yeah, right. Show me some more stuff now, because now I have something to hook it onto.
Right, because when I went through navigation, man, I was overloaded, and it was all I could do was log in, get my password going, and find the transaction on the menu. That's all I needed to do, but now I want to do some more fancy, slick stuff.
All right. Good stuff. So does that screenshot help there?
Yep, that helps a lot, because now you can point to it, and you can say, when I click the first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one, then this is what happens.
Okay. Yeah, because there are a lot of there, and especially like when you get to that fourth one, that sentence does not even make any sense when you read it.
Right.
It's gibberish. All right, so the next one we're going to go to, again, I'm going to go back up into the main menu to get the clutter off of the screen, go back into the Customizing of Local Layout button, click on the Options option, and here we're going to go to the Local Data tab. In the Local Data tab, the first section you see is History, and the History turns on or off or changes how fast or when the data comes up of a field and the data that's been entered into that field. So when you're in a cursor, if data has been entered into that field, and if you have your history turned on, you can display the data that has previously been entered into that field and select from that drop-down box of data if that's the data that you need. Now, let me just talk about the off, on, and immediately, and I'll give you a beware, and then we'll go into a transaction and take a look at it. So if I have my history turned off, I'll never see a list of the data that's been entered into that field. If I have it turned on, I'll be able to see the list of that data that's been entered into the field, but I need to press the tab key first, or the space, not the tab key, but the space bar first. So I'm in the field, I don't see anything, I press the space bar, and then the history of the data that's been entered will show up in a drop-down box. If I select immediately, as soon as my cursor goes into the field, then it'll drop down that box with the data that's been entered. Now, the be aware is this is for data that's actually been entered into the field. I've typed it into the field versus I select it from a selection box. So if you select it from a match code selection box, it doesn't come into that history field. So let's go take a look at that. I'm going to leave it on, let's see, I'll put it on mode, and I'll go over to my transaction. I'm going to go to the MB51 transaction as our example. And in here, I've entered materials into the material field. I know that I have my history turned on, but it doesn't display. I press the space bar on my keyboard, and my options drop down for the data that's been entered into there before, and I select the material number that I'm looking for if, in fact, I have repetitive materials that I play with. Now, if you already have data in the field, then you can press the space bar and you're not going to get that list. You're just going to get the material that's already entered into that field. So I can take my data out and get the drop-down box again. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the customizing of local layout, go into the options option, and I'm in the local data tab. I'm going to select the immediately option. Click on the OK button to activate that change, exit out of the transaction, come back into the transaction MB51. As soon as I go into the transaction, my cursor is immediately in the material field because it's the first field on the screen, and you see that my drop-down box immediately displayed for me. So you have a couple of options there for the history. Now I'll go back into the customizing of local layout options, and there are other settings here in the history. So if you wanted to clear your history, clear history button. Now, unfortunately, clear history is going to clear all of history. So you just have to be aware that it's a blanket, and so if you wanted it for one field, you're not going to get that. Also, the expiration, maximum permitted file size, maximum number of entries. So you really don't care so much about the maximum permitted file size unless you set that to 0, which would be a problem, because it's just the file size that retains those entries. And because they're text entries, they really don't take up a whole lot of space. So the default is 10 megabytes, which is certainly plenty. And then if you wanted that data to expire on a particular date, then you would set it in the expiration field. And then if you wanted to have a maximum number of entries that are available from that drop-down box of data entry, then you would set that maximum number in this field right here. So that's the history, turning on or off the field data entry history. Any question about that?
Nope.
Okay. All right, our next tip is show keys in drop-down list. So we're going to go back to our little friend, the customizing of local layout. Let me go back to the main menu, customizing of local layout, options option, and we're going to go into the expert tab. Now I can't see the expert tab from here, so I have a couple of options. I can use my scrolling buttons left or right, so my right button would scroll me through my tab, or I can use my list button. The list button shows me everything to the left of the list button, so all of my tabs are available, and I can select the expert tab from there. In here we have a control section, and the control section says, okay, show keys in all drop-down lists, and if you do that, then sort those items by the key. So we're going to go over to the purchase order transaction, purchase order change transaction, and show you an example of that so it makes a lot of sense to you. So I've got the show keys in all drop-down lists selected, and click on the OK. I'll go to the ME22N transaction. While I'm in here, there is an order type field. the order type field, when I click on the list button, it gives me a list of order types that are available. In this list, there are codes and there are descriptions. So I have my codes selected. So if you look over here on the PowerPoint slide, it's a little small, so I'm going to resize it for you. Show keys in all description lists. I have that turned on. So I get the D, V, E, C, F, O, I, N, N, B, U, V in my list. If I had selected sort items by key, it would have sorted the items in this list by these keys versus by the description. So I'll go back into the customizing of local layout, select my options, go back to my expert tab, which is there, and the control keys, I'll sort items by key. Click on OK, go back into my list, and now my list is sorted by the keys. If I go back into customizing of local layout, go to the options, and remove sort keys in all, or show keys in all drop-down lists, OK. It will show the key in the one that's already in the transaction because it's already listed in that field. But when I select my drop-down list, the keys don't display any longer. So any transaction that has a field in it where there are actually keys associated with the data in that field, that's how you turn those keys on. So I know I've had questions in the past. It actually happened in an upgrade. Those settings got changed during an upgrade. And after the upgrade, we had a lot of frantic people. My codes don't show up anymore. Which codes are you talking about? You know, that code that displays right here. No, I don't know which code displays right there. Where are you? So we had a lot of help desk situation with that. All right, the next one, which is the last one for us because we're right at time, is the changing of the colors of the screen. So this one is in the customizing of local layout button, but it's now in the new visual design. So in the new visual design, this is where we can turn our audio on and off. I mentioned that earlier with the pop-up messages, the beep when you get a message. So your audio has to be turned on here. If you don't like that audio, you can turn it off. And you can also change your font size in this tab as well. So my color settings. I can play with my color settings in this color settings box to find a setting that works well for me if I just really like to change my settings. If you don't get enough color options that you like within this box, you can come to this link and you can give yourself even more options. So if I deselect or uncheck this link, it cuts the connection between the foreground color and the background color. So let me show you the two. So I'll check it, and when I change the foreground color, you'll notice the background color changes at the same hue that the foreground does. If I uncheck it, when I change my foreground color, it does not change my background color, and it allows me to get more color options. And when I click on the OK button, it's going to change my color settings on my SAP screen. Click on OK, and ooh, that's not so nice. It looks like an Easter egg. I will immediately have to go change that.
That's amazing.
So the nice thing about this color option, I mean, really with the color changes, it's about personal feelings because personal feelings impact productivity. And if you don't believe that, call Microsoft, and they will tell you how many dollars they've spent on allowing you to put a picture on your desktop. That picture on your desktop doesn't do anything for you functionality-wise in your business world or in your personal world. But what it does is it makes you feel better, and when you feel better, you're more productive. So color settings are all about personal productivity and how you feel. But there is a color option for you that if you work in multiple systems, let's say you work in the production environment, but you're also part of a test team testing some functionality in a test system, you can actually change the color setting of your test system to be different than the color setting of your production system so that it's very easy for you to see which system that you're in. I find that very effective for people because quite often they have those systems side by side with each other, and if they're the same color, you can get confused about which system that you're working in. But if you change the color, it really helps for immediate identification. All right, so that wraps it up for us today. So, Tom, did you learn anything new today?
I learned lots of new stuff. The last tip of having the different systems and different colors is just outstanding. That's really a very beneficial tip. The entry slide with the animation of the magician pulling the stuff out of his hat was hilarious. That's a good slide.
He is cute.
I like the format of the webinar, the 30 minutes. Like I said to you, your real value here is the ability to get in and get out with ongoing tips. And if you subscribe to the service and get this happening as part of your weekly routine, like I mentioned to you, you're like the personal trainer for SAP, right? So
right.
Do your exercises, do your productivity improvement, your 30 minutes a week, and you'll be a better SAP person at the end of the year.
And you've been saying that to me a long time, and you've definitely been an influence. I've been Tomanized.
I like your process where if you want this stuff, you got to join the club. So there's benefits for club membership, the privileges of the club member. You get the PDFs and you get the handouts and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's really good that you're sharing it with people. But if you want the bonus deluxe stuff, you got to be a member of the club.
Yeah.
I learned the underlying linking fields and the other stuff we already talked about. Okay. That's really good, Ginger.
Good. Well, I'm glad you learned something new today, and that's just testament.
I mean, that's the point. You can never learn enough of this stuff. Hopefully, I'm sharing things with you that you're learning, and you're sharing things with me that I'm learning. So there's a mutual benefit here.
Yeah, I tell you, if I could get people to the point where they're contributing things into versus, okay, Ginger knows everything. Well, Ginger doesn't know everything. Ginger learns from you just like you learn from me. And if we share that, then we could collectively put it into the pool, and everyone can have advantage.
Yeah, and then it grows better and better with every contribution, right?
Right. Yep, absolutely. Okay, Tom, well, I've taken you 6 minutes beyond our time, so
okay.
6 minutes into lunch, right?
I may or may, I already ate, but thank you for offering. I may or may not be on the next one. Am I the only guy registered on the next one? Are there more people joining us?
I don't know. I haven't checked.
Okay.
I haven't checked, so sure. But I'll be on it anyway because I'll be working on stuff. So.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks. Thanks a
lot. Talk to you later, Tom.
Bye.
Bye.